racist redistricting. It's time to get into it. This is a Supreme Court case you may have not been following, but it's a pretty big deal. Supreme Court case that could hand the House to Republicans, says the New York Times. Republicans have been redrawing congressional districts this year at President Trump's behest, but so far it hasn't seemed to be enough to deny Democrats a reasonable path to control the House of Representatives. That might change if the Supreme Court strikes down Section 2 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act in Louisiana versus Calais, a case that the court heard on Wednesday. Without Section 2, which has been interpreted to require the creation of majority-minority districts, so a district in Congress that is a majority of, various minority groups, Republicans could eliminate upward of a dozen Democratic-held districts across the South. Now, here is the scare map from the New York Times. This is what could happen. What you see on the current map, if you're listening on podcasts, the current map is the southeast of the United States and a bunch of blue districts kind of mixed in there. What could happen if they do this? Well, Republicans could gain 12 more seats, including 9 without Section 2 of the VRA, Voting Rights Act. Now, if you see that map, it's mostly red, and that's, of course, evil. Red equals evil, unless we're talking about communism. Then it's wonderful. Now, they have this little kind of flow chart. It's a little difficult to understand, but I'll try to walk you through it here real quick. Basically, they're saying they're expecting Texas, Missouri, and Utah to redistrict, and that will make it so that the national popular vote would need to be won by Democrats by 1.3 points to get the House. So normally you think, okay, well, if they just win it, probably there's a good chance they're going to win the House. They're going to have to win that House by a little bit larger margin of 1.3%. Now, if California fights back, they'd only have to win by 0.2%. But then there's Florida, Indiana, Ohio, and Kansas that might go and give more seats to Republicans. So the Democrats would have to win by 1.4%. But if Section 2 is struck down, it could be between 4.4 and 5.6% that the Democrats would have to win by in the national popular vote just to barely win the House. And if California doesn't do any of this, their redistricting, which could still fail, we'll get into the polling on that here in a second, but 5.1 to 6.1% they'd have to win by. So if you picture a country where Democrats are winning the popular vote by 6 points and maybe still losing the House, they don't like that very much, which is why they're very, very pissed off and scared. Democrats panic over redistricting numbers with pivotal SCOTUS decision looming. Now, look, there's a lot that goes into this whole decision, and we don't have time to go through the ins and outs of every little piece of this and how it's twisted and turned over the years. But what I will say is the interpretation that the United States is required to create districts based on the color of someone's skin is on its face insane, right? Like the whole point of I thought the lesson we all learned from back in the day was picking things like this based on skin color, bad idea, right? That was supposed to be bad. Now, what the left will say is, well, it was bad for a long time, and now we have to go the other way to make it right. And of course, this logic is held by some. Ibram Kendi is one of them. The good old classic, the only cure for past discrimination is current discrimination. The only cure for current discrimination is future discrimination. In other words, discrimination's fine as long as it gets us to where we want to go. In fact, we shouldn't just get rid of discrimination now. We should discriminate against white people, against evil Republicans, against the South, or whatever you want it to be. Because in reality, they were bad to us, 100 years ago. Now, all of this, to me, doesn't make much sense, honestly. I think the quicker path to us not thinking about these things that often would be the better path. Whatever the fastest road is to us never having to have a conversation about race ever again is the best path forward to me. Because all that does is make people focus on it. And if you stop and think about it for a minute, none of it makes any sense. Right? Like, we could pick any number of immutable characteristics that we all have, and filling that into this conversation would make no sense. Like, if I were to say we are required to draw congressional districts to make sure there's a majority of people who have green eyes instead of blue or black or brown, then, well, we have to do that because that's what the Constitution guarantees. We'd all say that's insane. If I said, well, we got to have those brown hair districts, we'd all say, what? What are you talking about? What does the color of the hair have to do with the person, the individual? Yeah, that's kind of the point. What does the color of the skin have to do with the individual? The color of the skin is just another one of these immutable characteristics. Just because we notice it a little bit more makes no difference. Should we have majority bald districts? Does that make any sense? Yes, I am getting, there's a lot of bald people here, so I'm getting some nodding on that particular one. But the bottom line is that none of that makes sense because these are characteristics that don't make up the man. They don't make up the person. We don't even do this with gender. What if they did a majority female district? Everyone would be like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. You don't do that. It's not the foundation of an individual. And these are all supposed to be decisions made by individuals. And that's what people are. They're individuals that make up these groups. We recognize that as conservatives. They don't, because they see people not as individuals, but as members of groups. It is part of the collective. Racism is collectivism. That's what it is. It's just another form. So when you hear all these people, they're like, oh, these people on the far right that are all racist. No, they're not. It's impossible to be racist if you're adopting a situation where you're focusing on individuals. You can hate a person of an individual race, not based on the color of their skin, but based on who they are. You can hate them. You can think they're annoying. You can think they're incompetent. You can think they're stupid. But it's not about the skin color. Of course, the Supreme Court can't make a lot of those arguments. It's really more based on the law and the Constitution, not just what the obvious thing should be. Neil Gorsuch was there. He got the NAACP lawyer to all but admit support for racial discrimination in redistricting. Again, this is Ibram Kendi and his mantra that he, by the way, people noticed that it was his mantra, and they noticed it, and they kept saying what his mantra was, so he took it out of the reprints of his book. I kid you not, that's a real story. Here is Neil Gorsuch talking to the NAACP lawyer, Janai Nelson.
Sometimes federal district courts order maps, and you're saying sometimes acceptable for a federal district court to order a map that intentionally discriminates on the basis of race?
I disagree with that formulation. So first and foremost, states and plaintiffs, as they put forth illustrative maps, cannot put forth maps that discriminate and that use race in an excessive fashion. The only actor that has broader leeway are states, because we give states breathing room. We give states wide latitude in order to balance their political interests and concerns.
So federal district courts can't discriminate on the basis of race in remedies, but states can?
Federal district courts can only order maps that are constitutional. And again, the constitutional boundaries are between Jingles and Shaw, which sometimes permits race.
States have more breathing room. So do they have the breathing room to intentionally discriminate on the basis of race?
They don't have breathing room to intentionally discriminate on the basis of race. They have breathing room to use race to remedy their own discrimination.
Okay, thank you.
So the only solution to past discrimination is current discrimination. She just outlined exactly that concept, even though she tried to deny it in the strongest terms possible. Also, there was a situation with the same lawyer going back and forth, talking about the real problems here. And I guess the real problems is white Democrats aren't voting for the right colors.
That's right. And in the state of Louisiana, that analysis was conducted in the Nairn case. And it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats were not voting for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not. And we know that there is such a significant chasm between how black and white voters vote in Louisiana that there's no question that even if there is some correlation between race and party, that race is the driving factor.
Quite the accusation there. Many baseless accusations just kind of floated out there about white people in general or black people in general. I think they were all pretty awful, because when you generalize like that, you usually get things wrong. And I had mentioned earlier that, look, you You should talk about the person as an individual. You can think someone's annoying as an individual. You can hate somebody as an individual. You can think someone's stupid as an individual. Case in point, Ketanji Brown Jackson is in the Supreme Court currently. Not exactly sure why. I don't think anyone really knows. So Ketanji Brown Jackson is in the Supreme Court, as I was saying, and she's worried that being black is basically like a disability. KBJ suggests black people can't vote and compares them to the disabled. If you don't believe that that's true, I'll play another clip for you.
I guess I'm thinking of it, of the fact that remedial action, absent discriminatory intent, is really not a new idea in the civil rights laws. And my kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities. And so it was discriminatory in effect because these folks were not able to access these buildings. And it didn't matter whether the person who built the building or the person who owned the building intended for them to be exclusionary. That's irrelevant. Congress said the facilities have to be made equally open to people with disabilities if readily possible. I guess I don't understand why that's not what's happening here. The idea in Section 2 is that we are responding to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities and make it so that they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? They're disabled. In fact, we use the word disable in Milligan. We say that's a way in which you see that these processes are not equally open.
This is, again, right down that same line from Ibram Kendi, right? It's not about whether someone is actually racist, right? The fact that they're white and have the benefits of this evil society is racist in and of itself. The effect is racist, so therefore the intent doesn't matter. Of course, when you're talking about racism, intent is really, in some ways, all that matters. It's about whether you are trying. Why are you doing a thing? If you don't date someone of a different race, are you dating them because you're not attracted to them? Are you dating them because are you not dating them because you're not attracted to them? Are you not dating them because you don't find them charming? Or are you not dating them because they're black, right? Like, that's a totally different thing that you shouldn't do. At least, it's like a bizarre sort of parallel to what she's talking about there. It's not about the race of the person. It's about what the individual person wants to do. And if a white person decides they want to vote for a white candidate or they want to vote for a black candidate, that should be their choice. And you don't need to restructure and micromanage and reverse engineer the result you're looking for. You have to live with what people's choices are in a democracy, or at least the elements of the democracy that fall within our constitutional republic.